So once again, good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to NUSS Business Connect presentation on and webinar on the applications of artificial intelligence. My name is Jeffrey Na. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and part-time lecturer in an innovation and entrepreneurship space. I manage a business advisory company called JN Capital and Growth Advisory, as well as run a Future Ready Academy that helps to prepare the next generation for the future of work in Industry 4.0. With me, I have today a very illustrious panel. Mr. Gopal Varutaraju. Gopal is currently working with Prowler.ai, is the regional director for Asia Pacific. Prowler is an AI company founded in Cambridge, UK, about 4 years ago. It specializes in machine learning to address various industry and functional business challenges. Gopal has had an illustrious 25-year IT advisory and management consulting career. He has been in the past with SAP, with DHL, with IBM, ASEAN Global Solutions, as well as Magnus Management Consultants. So we have an AI expert with a 25 years IT experience. Welcome, Raja Gopal. Then we have Andre Tan. Andre Tan is a data scientist at Gojek, Southeast Asia's leading on-demand multi-service tech platform, otherwise known as Super App. He tackles a variety of critical business problems in the marketplace workstream, which balances the competing interests of Gojek customers, drivers, and partners. Andre works on algorithmic pricing, and he'll share a bit of that with you later. It helps Gojeks to make informed pricing decisions for millions of customers through advanced machine learning tactics. Prior to Gojek, Andre was also the technical lead for the data science recommendation team, where he pioneered a novel food recommendation engine, the patent of which is currently pending. Andre is a graduate of National University of Singapore, has a bachelor's degree in business analytics with honors and is on the Dean list. He spent a year in Silicon Valley with NUS Overseas College, where he built recommendation engines at Playphone, a mobile gaming platform acquired by Gung Ho. He also served as the president of the NUS Entrepreneurs Association during his time there, and also has read courses at Stanford University. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, two very distinguished panel members to share with you this evening what is artificial intelligence and what does the future hold for us. Now, a little quick introduction about NUS Business Connect. NUS Business Connect is a community of business owners and professionals with a desire to forge new connections and seek new opportunities through networking and overseas business missions. If you are interested to join us, you can drop an email to the event organizer, Ms. Fatia, at fatia@nuss.org.sg. And that's fatia@nuss.org.sg. Welcome you to join NUSS Business Connect, a community of business owners and professionals. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Andre Tan of Gojek for his presentation. Andre, all yours.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Hi, guys. My name's Andre. Sorry, give me a moment to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Am I audible? Okay, I'll just get started then. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about two use cases that I've worked on during my time at Gojek. Hopefully some of the value that I can bring to this panel here is that I can try to bridge the gap between what you see in terms of like data strategy, as well as taking that strategy and trying to execute it in industry. So some of the things that I'll be talking about today are things that my team has worked on ourselves. And hopefully these are things that you probably have experienced in like your daily life or at home when you use Gojek. Yep. So for those of you that don't know, Gojek is a platform that offers a variety of services. Basically, you can pick up your phone and you can perform some, take some action. So suppose that you're hungry, you might go onto the app, you might open this app called GoFood, and you would try to order some food, and a driver will take that order and order it from the restaurant and deliver it to you all the way to your doorstep. So the first use case that I want to talk to you about today is for GoFood. So on GoFood, there's a bunch of dishes that we usually offer to our customers. And the main question that we're trying to answer is that of all of these dishes on GoFood, which ones do I actually want to eat today? And this question is actually a pretty complex question, because customers tend to have very different decision-making processes. Some customers may care about flavor profile, others may care about food being value for money, others may just be looking at trying out a new merchant. So the next question that you might ask is, why do we need machine learning to solve this problem? And the answer is that there have been solutions or there have been manual solutions to this in the past, and a lot of these solutions have been very effective previously. So for example, if you were a food delivery platform, one of the things that you might want to do is that you might want to just show recommendations from the top 5 or top 20 merchants in your application. So you might just show a list of all your best sellers. But what might happen in this case is that you might end up showing a list of all McDonald's or KFC, and these are not things that people necessarily want to eat on a daily basis. So the problem with bestsellers is that it is quite a boring solution, and it also alienates quite a large portion of your merchant base, because you only show like 2 or 3 merchants every time. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have expert systems, where if recommendations is something that's important to you as a business, you might want to hire a team to come together to design recommendations that people enjoy. So for example, you might say, if there is someone who came onto the platform that is a vegetarian, I want to tailor very specialized salad shops to show to this customer. The problem with that approach is that it can be very costly and it's very difficult to scale. So these are both things that we have tried before at Gojek. We have tried using bestsellers and we've tried using expert systems. But eventually we decided to go with an AI and machine learning based approach, because we found that it's the most scalable approach. So what this does is that it allows us to find new ways to delight our customers. It allows us to say that it allows us to tailor the experiences on the application to each of our individual customers. If a customer enjoys fried foods, we might recommend more fried foods to them. If they are more healthy eaters, we might recommend more salad items for them. It also allows us to build a fairer platform for our merchant partners, because we get to showcase food items that are from a variety of cuisines. By ensuring that our customers can find things that they enjoy eating on the platform on a daily basis, it also is a good thing for the business, because we get to increase the overall booking conversion rates. And one of the other things that the use of AI and ML has provided us with here is that it allows us to adapt to changing preferences in the food marketplace. For example, if bubble tea is suddenly a hot new trend, that is something that we can account for without explicitly specifying that in our systems. So on the left of the slide here, what I've tried to do is I've tried to portray the business problem as well as the thought processes behind why we chose AI as a solution. And on the right here, I want to sort of paint a picture of how we actually implemented this solution in Gojek. This is a oversimplification of our actual models, but the general idea behind what we're trying to do is that we're trying to find people who tend to buy similar things and use that information as an indication that they have similar food preferences. So over here on the left, if there is someone who has bought pizza and donuts in the past, and he's also bought chips, then we might recommend to someone else who has only bought pizza and donuts but not chips to try buying potato chips to see whether he likes it. So this method is quite a simple approach, and it has proven reasonably effective within the Gojek context. It has helped us to generate additional 1 million bookings every month. The next use case that I want to talk to you about is about the pricing problem. So if you've taken economics 101, basically there's always this one graph that they like to show you, which is the demand and supply curve. And what that curve tells you is that the price the intersection of those curves is the price that all market participants will have to pay. It is the price that is agreed upon because it factors in all of the costs of a transaction. That is what happens in a free market, but Gojek is a slightly different kind of a marketplace. It is a design marketplace where the price is not necessarily determined by market participants. So there is a chance for Gojek to price wrongly and introduce inefficiencies into our business model. So there are three main ways that Gojek might be pricing its services. The first is that it could end up underpricing. The second is that it could end up giving a fair price. And the third is that it could end up overpricing. So what happens under these three scenarios is that if you underprice, customers tend to be very happy because they need to pay less, but drivers tend to be unhappy because it means that they have to perform more trips in order to get the same take-home salary. On the other hand, if you overprice, customers are unhappy, whereas drivers are happy. The win-win scenario here is one where you give a fair price that both the customers and the drivers agree to, so that you can complete the transaction without introducing any additional costs. So even if we underprice, we still want the transaction to go through. And in order for us to make that happen, we need to subsidize the customers. We need to incentivize the drivers by giving them additional bonus points to make up for the missing income that they are losing out on. If we overprice, we end up needing to give more vouchers to our customers in order to incentivize them to complete that booking. And if we do a fair price, then it's a win-win scenario for all market participants. So what this means is that Gojek as a service becomes more reliable. We spend less money incentivizing customers and drivers, and we get to complete more trips every day. So as you can imagine, for a company of Gojek scale, a small improvement in terms of reliability is actually experienced by hundreds and thousands of people on a daily basis. So again, what I'm trying to do here is on the left, I try and describe the business problem and our thought process behind it. And on the right, I will give like a very simple overview of our solution. So the solution that we have developed sort of sits at the intersection of economics and this technique called reinforcement learning. That's basically a fancy term for learning from feedback. So over here, the way that the model works is that it first tries to observe the environment. So for example, is demand or supply high at this point in time? Is it rush hour? Is the person trying to call a Gojek from CBD? Is it raining? So it takes all of these considerations into factor, and then it tries to estimate a price for that transaction. So for example, it might say, typically during rush hour, if it's not raining, I might charge someone $15 to go from point A to point B. So based on this estimated price, we want to reward our model if it has guessed the price correctly, and we want to penalize the model if it has not. So the way that we get this information is we collect data on whether the transaction has actually completed based on the estimated price, and then we tell the model to update its predictions accordingly. So based on that, the model will then learn to, the model will try to learn from its mistakes, and this will continue in a cycle. So it learns from its mistakes, and the next time that it tries to give a price prediction, it will try to do it a little bit better. So, yep. That's my 2 use cases.
Excellent. Thank you, Andre. That's an excellent representation of how AI can actually become a win-win for both the business and its customers. In Andre's presentation, he highlighted two opportunities where AI was able to balance the interests of the businesses as well as the customers. With GoFood, AI was able to implement a recommendation engine using AI and machine learning because it becomes more scalable and it's better compared to experts, which become more costly and not viable for the company, versus the bestseller listings, which are boring to the consumer. So AI and ML has helped Gojek to be able to offer GoFood with the scalable recommendations out of 1 million bookings. That's one area. But AI is also able to implement, secondly, the reinforced learning that is able to make the markets more efficient through algorithmic pricing. And this makes it fairer for both the customers and the drivers. Because if they are underpriced, customers are happy, but the drivers will be unhappy. Conversely, if it's overpriced, customers will be unhappy, although the drivers will be happy. So with algorithmic pricing, through reinforced learning, meaning that the system will observe the environment, guess the optimal price that will balance the interest between the driver and customers, and then reward accordingly, and through an iterative process of learning and adjusting, we'll be able to come up with a fair price that is a win-win for both the business and the customers. So those are excellent recommendations of how AI is able to balance the interests of businesses and consumers. And it becomes a win-win for everyone. So thank you very much, Andre. And now I will turn to Gopal to touch on how AI has impacted industry and smart city initiatives. What AI can do for industry, have done for industry, and as well as build a smarter nation. Over to you, Gopal.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. Can you guys all hear me? Jeff? Okay, I presume everybody can hear me.
Yes,
okay, okay.
Very well.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey, for the introduction. What I would do is taking off from what Andre did, talking about the application of AI in the consumer market, or rather the personal space as well, because we all of us use Grab, and we benefit from the convenience of such solutions, right? And what happens behind is actually is not resident to a lot of people. So that's very good for Andre to talk a bit about that. Let me walk you through the other slides, that other use cases that I wanted to share today. Okay. This is just an opening teaser, right? I think a lot of you would be very familiar with Google, Netflix. You might have seen chatbots, what you can see in the bottom here. Gaming, most kids are into gaming these days. I picked up this slide here. I'm not advertising for anyone in particular here, but I saw this poster and I took a photo of it. It says a smarter massage with AI voice control, right? And this was from the Straits Times. It's robotics cleaning machines, equipments and all, but they have AI embedded in it. And what you see on the left, where I'm pointing my cursor, is the autonomous vehicle as well. and how everyone is, a lot of the big players are rushing into building autonomous vehicle and all, right? So there's a lot of money going there. There's no clear winners yet. There's a lot more work that is required in that area of deep learning. But, this is just to give you a bit of a flavor, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of examples, right? So the first one that I'm going to focus on e-commerce. And there are a lot of relevance in e-commerce and also subsequent industries, but that's the particular case study I've chosen for the smart industry. For the smart city, I've taken two. I'm talking a little bit about preventive maintenance in the city concept, and that's how they use IoT, Internet of Things, and machine learning, and surveillance facial recognition. Before I start, right, I think maybe I would like to dwell a little bit about the spectrum of AI, because AI actually has many components to it, right? And when we mention IoT or blockchain or robotic process automation, RPA, chatbots, they are all agents. So they are agents to receive information, be it verbal, but be it voice, be it digital or unstructured data. These agents are collectors, and once the information is collected, then AI actually applies algorithms, right? So it applies machine learning to be able to understand the data and make some predictions. So that's the fundamental part about when we say machine learning. I think it's very important to know that within machine learning, there's a lot of subsets, right? You got the neural networks, you have also the reinforcement learning, what Andre talked about and stuff like that. So there is technologies embedded within it, but we will stay at the level of trying to understand the business use case and how AI can apply to the industries. So the first one I'm going to do is talk about is the e-commerce profile. So a lot of you, I am sure during COVID, have been going on to the e-commerce platforms, right? Like Amazon Prime, Lazada, Zalora, and the likes. So I'm now wearing the hat as if I was a Lazada, right? If I was Lazada, what do I do? So we have consumers logging in throughout the day, buying things. And there's a lot of data that is collected in their backend system in the cloud, the Lazada's cloud, right? They're selling things. Customers are buying at a certain price. What happens behind the scene is these data are brought across into a platform where machine learning, there's AI and machine learning, just put there as just refer to them as models, right? So they are models that actually crunch the data at speed, because you got volume of data coming in, you have variety of data because you're buying many sort of products, and then you have a velocity because it's also how much of the data is coming in at what time and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that happens during this period. And what happens is there are decisions that you can make out of information that the models actually predict. And what are the things that the model do? So I'll take a step back and try to explain from the area of acquisition of this data on the platform as consumers buy, their profiles are there, what they buy, the kind of price, what's the basket value, and even individual. So if you have an account, so if I got an account with Lazada, if I spend in one purchase $100, they would know that information, okay? So what do they do? So first thing that they do is they do customer profiling and segmentation. So they profile the customers by the purchase, so to understand purchase behavior. By knowing the profile of the gender, age, and even vicinity and location, they can understand the propensity for customers to buy. So what happens is purchase behavior. So for example, a lot of the purchases that are bought by the teenagers to the early 20s, right, happens anytime from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning. So this information is very critical, because what happens is with that kind of information, the platform players like Lazada and all can then have target marketing strategy. So they offer promotions, right, similar to what GrabFood, but they offer similar promotions on products that you have purchased. It could be books, it could be shoes, and they will try to correlate products. And that is done with a lot of speed. There's a lot of data out there. So they must be able to match the right type of product and target market, right? What happens here is you save a lot of money and effort on doing any marketing strategy, just throwing in advertisements to you while you're still Googling in Lazada, but for things that you're not interested in. So there's a very important element of cost and benefit here from the marketing strategy. So you actually do not waste resources. Pricing strategy. You might not know this, but let's say for a particular brand of watch that has just been, released on the net, certain brand selling very fast. Actually, what the AI machine learning algorithm can also do is understand patterns of purchases, understand the pricing, and let's say if it knows that this is a hot seller, they can actually easily mark up 10% of the price for maybe the balance of stock that is available in their inventory. So let's say they got only about 100 of items left of the particular watch, they can actually price that up. So that's the kind of intelligence that you can derive and make decisions. So that's where the point of making decisions is. You make very informed decisions. Well, what is important here is that there's tons of data that goes onto the platform. And in today's context, right, the Singapore government is trying to advocate for SMEs to come onto the platform, to go e-commerce, right? Let alone the payment gateway stuff, which is more transactional, but trying to understand behavior and all. So I think there will be advent of more platform players, right? Lazadas and all are big. There will be other mid-sized companies that will be offering such solutions where SMEs can actually promote their product, get the intelligence, get the insights on pricing, products, how much to make, when to make it, seasonalities and stuff like that. So this is so I'm using this example from an industry perspective of e-commerce, and it applies to other insights as well. So for example, if there are a lot of returns for whatever reason, a particular customer segment group buys products and they returns it after 1 week, a couple of days and stuff like that. Returns goes down to your cost. So it will affect any company's profitability, right? So what they do is they try to also understand models, products that has that kind of returns. It could be customer, it could be a product. So it is important for them to also mine those information using AI machine learning as well, right? So there's an element of analytics that goes on top of it onto this platform. So the analytics platform is what you see here where I'm pointing. So the analytics will give the decisions for merchandisers, pricing, marketers and stuff like that as to what actions should be taking going forward. The next use case that I'm going to talk about is it could be a city, it could be an industry, right? But I will give a bit of I will relate this to the city concept. So we have telco companies with a lot of towers. They have base stations, 4G, 5G is being erected and stuff like that. And then what you see below is the building lift system. As you know, 70% of the housing in Singapore are HDB. So Sabana would have importance of controlling all this in terms of lift maintenance, status of lifts or lifts and the HDB, right? So what happens is, this is where I introduce concepts of sensors and IoT as well. You can have IoT sensors, other agents as well from this equipments, right? They could have in base stations in telco, in lift systems and all, getting information in real time, right, about performance of that equipment, performance of the base station or performance of lift, right? It also mines other information of usage and historical measurements. So usually they have a backend system, they call it SCADA or plant control systems, and then with IoT sensors, they actually provide this information with speed. And what happens is this data that comes across, and I put the cloud here because most vendors today provide the solutions on the cloud, right? So what happens is the data is then pushed into the cloud. They have machine learning models to predict potential breakdown. And how do they do that? They have historical data. So if they have particular lifts and a certain model of lifts, right? They would exactly know lifts of certain model that are 5 years old, even in a certain particular area in Singapore, tends to break down very fast. So these insights will be generated and maintenance team will be given a dashboard to actually monitor. So the slightest incident of vibration, for example, so the lift is getting a lot of vibrations, and that data is actually sent to the model. You can have preventive maintenance with alert, with alerts and workflows straight away to the either the internal or the external supplier, the maintenance team, right? Could be an internal maintenance team or the external maintenance team. So immediately the information about which part of the equipment, it could be a component that could be faulty, it could be the whole lift system could be faulty, it could be, it could be just one of the gadgets that could be faulty, right? So when you place sensors in those areas, you'll be able to actually understand and quickly react to the situation. With that information, those data can also be sent back to the manufacturers. So today, a lot of the manufacturers are becoming proactive. They are also talking to service providers or owners who are using this equipment, and they say that they would like to get feedback loop so that they can actually improve their maintenance checklist, design enhancements, and stuff like that. So in this end-to-end scenario, right, there's a lot of people tend to benefit from here. Stakeholders here are the maintenance people, the owners, so that they actually do preventive maintenance before an equipment fails. Because when the equipment fails, like a lift system fails, it really is cumbersome, right? It's so inconvenient, it inconveniences the residents of that building. So this is what potentially you can see a lot more happening today. I'm not saying that it's already happening in HDB today. It's probably not. They are looking at the blueprint. I am sure these are technologies that they are really exploring. Another example that I like to give in the smart city is surveillance. I think everybody will know this, right? You will see surveillance cameras all over. But interestingly, so there's statistics that I got from the internet not too long ago, that 90% of the surveillance videos being recorded are never watched. Why? Because there's just so much of data, so much of time required to look through a video screen, right? So what happens is there are now technologies that are able to read digitize those information, but actually spot anomalies, detect anomalies that you're looking for, right? It could be for security purposes. It could be for segmentation, for, let's say, even transportation purposes and stuff like that. So the use case could be varied, but what is important is that you can now actually do facial recognition, right? And this is real. What you see here is really happening in some countries already. So they can actually look at individual and zoom down a particular location. If there's too much congregation in a certain location because of COVID, and they are violating the current laws of social distancing and all, you can actually react to it as well, right? But the use case in this is more than security, right? It's got a lot more. It could be for health reasons. It could be about even looking at, like I said earlier, transportation and how transportation routing can be used as well. You can look at surveillance cameras, you look at traffic situations, and a lot of us use Google and stuff like that, right? But you can even have real-time information coming from, the LTA provides it and not, but there will be institutions that will be providing such information. What is important is such equipments are also expensive to be implemented in the locations and overall across the city of Singapore. So that there's some cost element. So that's also a cost benefit to what use case and what the real benefits would be, right? Using surveillance with facial recognition, right? So I will kind of stop here because this is part I would like to post it back to Jeff, and I think we will have Q&A later. I will stop sharing now. Over to you.
Thank you, Gopal. Excellent sharing on how AI has impacted and will continue to impact industry as well as a smart city. From e-commerce to making it more relevant for the business owners and the customers not to waste resources. Customers so that they get shown what is their preferences and not something that they would never buy. And also they got to be able to get the offer of the promotions, particularly at the hours that they are buying. I don't know who buys at 2 a.m. in the morning, but apparently, according to Gopal, some people buys at 2 a.m. in the morning. So I'm not of that generation, so probably I don't know. So it helps the people to buy when they want to buy, what they want to buy, how they want to buy. Whether it is the color, the shape, the size, all becomes more relevant to them. So they waste less time, they're more effective, and they get a better price. For business owners, the relevance gets in the way of not having to waste money on promoting the wrong products to the wrong customers at the wrong time at the wrong price. So it's getting right pricing, right customers, right place, more accurately with the customer profiling and decision-making engine that draws on AI and machine learning to generate the analytics to enable the insights that will enable e-commerce to be more relevant for both consumers and businesses. Turning from consumers and businesses to a smart city, Gopal shared how AI in the realm of IoT and machine learning is now able to help lift operators and facilities owners manage potential breakdowns of lifts and alert the maintenance crew early through the usage of information that is transmitted through sensors, IoT sensors, to the cloud, and so that it can generate an algorithmic model to be able to do preventive maintenance before it's required. And as we all know, preventive maintenance is always better than repair maintenance, which is more costly. So in this way, it is able to predict when the maintenance should happen and how it should happen, and it can happen and in a way which is less inconvenience to the homeowners and the users of the lift, so that it happens at times when they are not in maximum usage. And at the same time, it will be less costly to maintain. So in this way, AI and machine learning with the IoT sensors is able to save time, save money, and make everyone stay safer. Turning to surveillance cameras, which are everywhere, and correctly so, Gopal pointed out 90% of the videos are never watched. And I guess that the 10% that are being watched, probably the human eye will miss quite a few things. But with AI and machine learning, these anomalies can be detected not only more accurately, but faster. So it can detect the risk faster. The issue is here is more accurate and faster. Okay, and hence it will minimize surveillance costs to the public and the society and makes for a more intelligent and smart city such that risk situations are detected, but also the better situations where traffic congestions can be rerouted and minimized, enhanced, leading to a more smarter and more convenient and more comfortable smart city for everyone. So thank you very much for that sharing, Gopal. Now I'd like to share a quick summary about how AI in the realm of 5G and IoT will be able to transform AI with machine learning with the help of sensors and the 5G network bandwidth. The 5G bandwidth network is exponential. So think of it as your pipe that is 10 times bigger, 10 times in an understatement. So it allows far more data to go through. And now the sensors are denser and smarter and everywhere, from visual data to other kinds of data that are being pumped through the bigger capacity network. So from your smart home to the personal healthcare wearables or your Apple Watch or Samsung Watch or your Fitbits, to devices that tracks your health, fitness and helps to remind you a lot of things, to the smart autonomous manufacturing robots in the supply chain management and predictive maintenance sectors, as well as the smart energy grids for smart city that will be able to perform and drive energy not only from the grid to the consumer, but from consumer, if they are able to harness renewable energy, will be able then to, for the excess electricity that they've generated, be able to sell the energy back to the grid. So it becomes literally a smart city, not only for transportation, but also for energy and security and many more. So with that, what will the future of smart cities, smart industries, smart home wearables look like? So with future IoT technologies, it shows no signs of slowing down. Edge computing are creating smart thermometers, smart appliances. From your refrigerators, will have transparent see-through glasses that will be able to have sensors that will enable you to order or intelligently even order for you or suggest for you what your shortage, whether it's eggs or meat or vegetable, or adjust the thermostats so that your fruit or vegetables needs different temperatures than the meat or your frozen ice cream. So you'll be able to adjust the temperatures according to the various compartments and then be able to have your toast exactly the way you want it, whether it's light or dark. And with voice AI, with Google Home and Alexa, already you can play your, switch on your lights, turn off your lights, play your favorite music or otherwise. And also beyond that, sing lullabies to your kids to go to sleep. With Vision AI, massive object detection and 4R recognition resolution that will totally transform the way we live, work, and play. Now I'd like to turn over to my panel members to share what they have seen of examples of AI innovations in Singapore, specifically in the area of startups, but it can also be for large corporates or multinationals. So if any of my panel member, Gopal or Andre, has thoughts about what are AI innovations are happening right here in Singapore, and Singapore is a smart, innovative nation, I'd like to hear from that. How about you start, Gopal?
Sure, thanks, Jeff. I think there were some questions on the Q&A, very relevant questions about, you know, who's actually adopting, who are the big players and stuff like that. To be honest, right, I tried to research and see which other, you know, smaller companies who are doing it in this part of the world in Singapore, and I found very few. What I noticed is most of this adoption is now at the bigger companies. So SIA has got Chris Lab, DBS had actually kicked off a program a couple of years ago where they support a lot of startups. So what DBS has done is, instead of developing it in-house, they might have some data scientists in-house, but what they're trying to do is also allow new players, young startups and all, to also come in and see to solve a particular problem. There are a lot of actually blind spots in terms of our business world. And if you are an industry practitioner, whether you be e-commerce or retailer and stuff, there's a lot of blind spots, right? So these blind spots cannot be handled or addressed by traditional ERP applications or transactional systems. So this is where exactly AI can be applied. So to answer your question, I think I've noticed the big players, Sembcorp have set up a division as well, Keppel, you know, group, and also in the area of logistics and all, there's so much opportunities to apply AI. So I would say that there are bigger companies that are setting a small team but working with vendors, and these vendors are usually coming from overseas. I work for a UK company, like what you have just you introduced me in the beginning. And when I'm going in and talking to a lot of the clients, I have to do a lot of education as well. So there are lesser vendors depending on which area. There's different kind of solutions as well. So we talked a bit about very specific solutions. So if you ask me, there are many areas, in terms of smart agriculture and all. I think government is promoting that. How do you do vertical farming and stuff like that? There are AI technologies being applied there as well. What I know of is how high do you grow your vegetables, right? The height of the vegetables, they can have sensors to actually monitor it, and how much water it needs to have because of moist, because of rain and all. You can actually have all this kind of sensors in the soil, actually doing smart farming as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've also come across some a few startup companies that are doing the urban farming, as you mentioned. They're looking into warehouses and also on the HDB rooftops. That using hydroponics and also tapping solar energy. So they're using sensors with AI and machine learning to optimize the kind of feed for the fertilizer for the plant, and so that the plant can go into the hydroponic roots. And the amount of radiation and sunlight, it says it will actually increase the yield of the crop and over time. So actually it's beneficial for the owner. So with the increased yield and the lower cost, that can potentially translate into lower consumer prices and fresher vegetables for all. And how about you, Andre? Have you what have you seen happening in the Singapore AI innovation front? Any examples, whether on small companies or larger companies, that you think Singapore can start to become a source of AI innovation?
Right. I must admit that I'm a little bit disconnected from how the startup scene in Singapore in general is using AI. But more broadly, I think in industry, I see two main ways in which AI is being implemented. So the first is AI as a form of automation. Basically, there is a business problem, there is some manual solution that already exists. AI just makes it more scalable. It allows you to find more intelligent situations. It basically takes something existing and it tries to improve on it. So some of the examples that I touched on earlier, which is like the recommendations examples or the pricing examples, are examples where it is possible to do it manually, but AI just makes it easier and allows you to do it in a much more scalable manner. So I think where startups can come in for these kinds of applications is as consultants, as like subject matter experts, where like you could have a startup that specializes in building recommendation engines that can act as plug and play modules for e-commerce players, for example. I haven't really seen specific examples of this in Singapore yet. Perhaps there are some. But I think there is also one company called Visense, where they try and use computer vision techniques to index images and use that as a way to improve the way that e-commerce players sell their products. So for example, I can go to some website like say Instagram, and there's this really nice dress that I want to buy. And what I can do is that I can search for this dress through this platform called Visense, and I'm able to purchase it at the end of the day. So I think there's quite a lot of room for innovation over there. The second type of way that I see AI being applied in the industry today is one where AI is less of a solution and it's more of the product itself. So it is situations where you don't necessarily, the product wouldn't exist without AI. So take this current day and age of Zoom meetings, for example. I'm sure many of you who have been on Zoom a lot have experienced this scenario where you're always on mute because you're afraid that someone might be talking in the background. And there's a lot of background noises. There might be planes flying overhead and things like that. So one of the very interesting applications that I've seen recently is one where there is this AI application that taps into your audio feed and it tries to mute out all of the background noises. So these kinds of applications weren't really possible before you had advances in all of these audio processing techniques, and there are things that are now possible. And I think these are really areas where smaller players can really come in because incumbents or like larger industry companies may not necessarily have an advantage over them. So yeah.
Thank you, Andre. So you mentioned a very interesting point. You say the larger incumbent companies may not necessarily have an advantage. So these are where the small players can come in. Can you elaborate on this a little bit? I think it's interesting to a lot of our SMEs as well.
Yep. Okay. So I think in general, there are two ways in which industries or like larger companies would have an advantage over smaller players. The first is in terms of technology and like talent. I think increasingly in the AI space as well as the software space, a lot of these technologies are becoming open sourced. There are things that everyday people like you and me can just go onto the internet and they can learn how to build those tools by themselves. They do not necessarily need to be in a specific company in order to use and extend on those tools. So I think the democratization of technology is one way in which the smaller players can start building their own applications in ways that larger companies may not be able to, because the differentiating factor here is like intellectual property. The second way in which I think larger companies would hold an advantage over smaller companies is in data. So large companies can collect data sets that smaller companies will not have access to simply because they do not have access to the same kinds of network effects. So in those cases, I think it really depends on what is the problem that we're trying to solve. For recommendations type problems, you kind of need historical data in order to make predictions in the future. But for problems where you're trying to do something like, say, muting the audio signals, that is something where you can create your own data sets. You can buy a mic, you can go to an airport, you can record yourself speaking with the plane flying in the background, and then you can generate your own data sets. So startups in that way are not necessarily handicapped, they just need to be a lot more creative.
Thank you, Andre. Now we have a few questions. We do questions from the Q&A from the audience. In particular for food, there's a particular question here on GoFood. Stephen Tan asked, what are the key challenges Gojek face in implementation and integration for GoFood?
Okay. I also see that Stephen had another question after that, so perhaps I'll address both of them at the same time. I think in general, a lot of the challenges come with trying to figure out what is the right business problem that you should be solving using AI. Because in my mind, AI is merely like a means to an end. It is not necessarily the goal at the end of the day. It's just one of the ways that you can be solving a problem. So I think one of the key challenges for us is really trying to figure out what is the problem that we're trying to solve and how it fits into our overall product strategy for GoFood. So for example, if I want to be recommending some dishes, how am I going to make sure that this plays well with the vouchers that I want to be giving? How do I make sure that I surface the right merchants in order to improve the overall experience on Gojek? In terms of technical setup, I would say that AI can be quite a tricky thing to engineer, because the analogy here is that suppose that I were a civil engineer and I'm trying to build a building. I might want to do a lot of calculations to make sure that everything is safe. But one day I wake up and someone in another department has changed the chemical composition of cement and all of my calculations are wrong. So that is the equivalent of what we're experiencing in AI engineering today. You can try and build very robust systems, but if you don't have tools to ensure that your data that is flowing into your systems are also clean, you're not going to have a very successful implementation. And very quickly, I'll just address your last 2 points on internal staff acceptance and reliability of the AI intervention. I think the way that Gojek has tackled a lot of these problems is that we adopt a very scientific approach towards these questions. So we don't necessarily say that AI is going to be better. What we do is we set up an experiment. We say we have one solution, which is, say, a bestseller list, and another solution, which is like some intelligent recommendation list that an AI has come up with. And what we do is we run an experiment. We show both of these lists to customers and we see which one customers react better to. And over time, what this means is that people start accepting the solutions that win, because it is something that they can see for themselves in the experiment itself. So it's not really about intuition. It's always about the data and what the data tells you at the end of the day. Yeah.
So thank you, Andre, for that answer. Now we have a question that actually pertains to the two questions, but they're a little bit related. So this gentleman is asking, for a business that is small in size in terms of revenue, how can AI play a role? How can businesses get started to leverage on this technology? What are your recommendations? And there's another question that not exactly the same, but is also asking around the same thing. It says AI requires a software, and different food business owners have different requirements and needs, and require a programmer to write AI language and analysts to key in the market data on a regular basis. So I guess the key question here is, for small companies, how can they deploy AI if they don't have the resources to hire programmers or analysts? So perhaps Gopal, you want to
Yep.
try and attempt this?
Sure, Jeff. I
Because
think that's
earlier
a
on you were talking about RPA, so I think that's could be interesting as well in relation to
yes.
this question.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question about that, because I think SMEs would have a challenge to build a team, and I said that earlier as well. What's happening today is companies like Azure, which is owned by Microsoft, Google, and AWS, right? So I've got no preference. There's no intent to make any preference here. But all these companies, right, actually have very good models there. They have very good prediction models and all. And like I said, the prediction models have a particular use case and industry flavor. But let's say make it very generic, like the e-commerce example that I used. So actually, any small SME, if they have a very good idea, and there's a lot of government programs with SIMTech, the Manufacturing Association of Singapore and all, what they are doing is they are also defraying some of this, what we call proof of concept. Normally, that needs to be a bit of an education through a kind of a proof of concept to understand what you need and what you can do, and whether you have the relevant data, right, to achieve a business problem. So there are service providers, and I think they are trying to make it a lot more cheaper. So basically, it's a software as a service. You use my models, but you can also bring in an expert to work like a service implementer, integrator. They can use the models as it is, and you can actually then refine the model to make it work for your business SMEs, right? So actually, there is a way to approach it. It's just that it is not being explained and not being. I think there's a lot of education that's required for the SMEs. So I think they are trying. I notice there's a lot of forums going on. But if I would take this, I'll make it very simple. So I say, what's your business problem? For the SME, you want to solve a particular problem, then you look out and see whether there are models that are being provided on the cloud. You don't have to buy them. These are already almost ready-made. You need to do some fine-tuning. You need to integrate to your backend system. So if you take in that construct, you just need some service integration partner. You can use the models in Azure, and then maybe you need a data scientist. So in that spectrum, you might have to outsource some of the work. You don't have to have them in-house. If you are slightly bigger a company, if SMEs is 100 million and below, right? So if you're 100 million, personally, in my view, is that it's worth considering having a kind of a partnership with some of these small startups. There's a lot of good startups in Singapore right now. They do not know how to sell because they are young and they are very tech savvy, but I think the government is trying to do the matching now. So there are ways to address this problem. So for the size of the business, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint, but if there is a lot of data that you're dealing with in your business, I think that probably has got a good qualifier for adoption.
So thank you for that. I think I've also think about shared services. Now, there have been a lot of other shared services. How do you see, Gopal, the opportunity to use shared services to make such services available to SMEs at an affordable cost?
Well, I think that's a very good. That would be a very good platform actually. If you have shared services, shared services could come from many disciplines: finance, HR. It could be sales and marketing. So whatever we talked about in terms of all the algorithms or the model that solves a certain particular problem, right? Shared services in finance. It's amazing, right? You receive your purchase, you got a purchase order, you receive your invoice from the vendor, it automatically matches it, and then it just spits out anomalies that does not match, goes and as the exception workflow, and then RPA comes in and sends it to the finance analyst to check what is wrong. And I can share with you, maybe it's not right to share with my customer, but I will share in the context of what they did is that they reduce, okay, I mean, they have a finance team just doing processing of checking the invoice with the purchases made online. And what they did was, by virtue of using a bit of AI, they then filtered down to a very small component of exception handling, and then they look at credit management and all. So they actually shifted the focus of the team to do other things rather than doing actual manual matching. So actually, there's a lot of potential for shared services to use that. Onboarding, you actually can have a lot of AI technologies and RPA to do onboarding for HR, right? So it's very cumbersome work, right? Sometimes you look at HR team, they have to do this every day, day in. So there are ways you can use onboarding to a certain level, and then you have to have face-to-face, but you can reduce that fraction, right? If you take a ratio, 30% be face-to-face, 70% basically done by AI. So I think there's a lot of room for shared services. And if shared services provide this to SMEs, it's an excellent platform.
Excellent, thank you. So we should start with Gopal as the champion of shared services for AI. Yeah, so okay, coming back to another question. A gentleman has a question about, should he be studying data science and what were the prospects for data science graduates in 4 to 5 years time? So maybe Andre, you are closer to the just finishing, and you are also a data scientist yourself. Perhaps you'd like to take this question?
Sure. All right. Yeah. So I guess I'll answer this question from the perspective of like where I think demand for data scientists will be in 4 or 5 years time. A lot of this are like just based off my observations. I'm not sure how things will actually turn out, but in general, what I see is a consolidation of data science talent within a lot of the larger companies or within like a lot of the government services. So for example, recently one of the more outstanding applications that we've seen is this model called GPT-3, which is something that this team has created that managed to that is the closest thing that we've seen to general AI so far, but it's not quite there yet. The key to this is that the team that developed GPT-3 was a team that is very focused on research and research within the field of AI. It's not something that like a small startup was doing or smaller players could afford to do because of all of the consolidation of talent. So I think that a lot of this research type work will be consolidated. And what you will see in the rest of industry is that you will have people who are trying to apply a lot of these research within the local context of their business. So alluding to one of the earlier points that I've made where a lot of the innovations in industry are being open sourced, what you'll see are AI engineers and machine learning engineers who can take a lot of these open source libraries and find ways to glue them together in order to build interesting applications of today. So just to draw like a small parallel to some of my work, a lot of the libraries that we use are actually readily available online. Most of the work that we do is engineering work to sort of like stitch things together. So I would recommend that if that is something that also interests you, I would encourage you to pursue a course in like engineering or computer science so that you understand software and you understand how software works in this new world. Yep.
Thank you, Andre. There's a question on that asked, how far is Singapore away from the smart city that I've shown? And a related question is what kind of impact COVID has had on AI and IoT in the areas of transport. So transport is also relating to smart city. So perhaps Gopal, you want to comment on that? So how far is Singapore in terms of achieving the smart city with or preparing ready for the smart city with the AI in the IoT and 5G era, especially also how will that or will that not affect transportation in Singapore due to the COVID impact?
Okay. So the first question in terms of how far is Singapore away, I personally believe, because I'm aware of some of the initiatives Sabana is taking with the government, URA and all. So there are initiatives towards really looking at the smart city. And of course, everything there is priority. The problems has got certain priority as well. So I'm not aware of the prioritization, but they have a team, they're already working on it. And I think we might be, maybe less than 5 years away to achieve some of this intelligence, applying AI in some areas, and in some areas it will be longer. And it's all about, the prioritization based on value. And I see it's very important value-based justification. So there is a lot of value. I think money will be poured into that area. The kind of impact COVID have on AI and IoT in the area of transport. Well, I think there is many facets of how transportation can be affected. COVID has affected transport, depending, air transport is very badly affected, right? Passenger transport, whereas cargo is growing. So so there is a direct impact of COVID because of travel bans and stuff like that. But let's say if you take in the smart city concept, right? Application of IoT to track performance of vehicles, performance or the efficiency of fuel and all, there's a very high possibility of that being happen. So I can give you an example, because my company is working with Mazda in Japan. What we are doing is we are improving the fuel efficiency of the engine, the latest engines that they are developing, and they are using our algorithm to be able to burn and injection mold, those what happens is it has got a kind of a area where it goes to a certain boundary and then it stops there. This is not for diesel, this is for fuel injection. So what happens is we have applied AI to actually improve the ability to get more fuel efficiency from the engines. So they are now actually using these algorithms to build the future engines, which means less fuel efficient. They're also looking at emission, right? So it's also green impact as well. So there are areas where I think area of transport would benefit from that. It could be the manufacturers of the cars or the lorries or the vans and stuff like that. If they apply it in the shipping world, right? They are already looking at how to go green, and there's also a certain measure of fuel that they are emitting, right? So, and during the COVID, what they are doing is we are refitting these ships as well. So that is something that I'm aware of. So I think in terms of IoT, the rest that are already being used is, cool, temperature control within vents and all, moving ice cream and chocolates and all. And that's all very simple. It's very simple technologies in there just to control, just to control temperatures and stuff. So that would be my 2 minutes on that, on transport.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There's another question. This is on the dark side of AI ML. It's asking about privacy violations, bias and bad data, socio-economic inequality. Who'd like to take this question?
I can start, no problems. Okay, so I think in terms of privacy violations, it is a real fact. One of the initiatives in Toronto, a smart city initiative in Toronto, was a very good paper written. They were actually going into getting public opinion or public agreement, let's put it this way, and they were pulled out. No way, the whole thing got canned because of privacy. So we have to take privacy seriously, right? So how much data is considered safe and sound to be provided for? So I think with PDPA rules and all, right, so it is a relevant problem. It's I would say a relevant challenge and concern for adoption. For bias and bad data, yes, okay. So AI were to dwell with good data, right? And if data is not good, biasness will automatically set in as well. So what models do is they can only be intelligent from the data that is provided. And that if there is already bias in the data, but if and human do not tell that there is biasness or anomaly in this data sets for my model to understand better, then you are going to deal with bad data, or the outcome is going to be very bad. So, and that was a relevant question also from another part of the question I answered online is about, how do I know whether it's going to be beneficial for us, for a customer, for a company, right? So this is very important. So knowing your business problem, the first thing, knowing the data that you have, and if it is bad data, you got to work on your data, because you're not going to achieve any outcome with data that has got biasness, right? And I think socio-economic inequality, I'm not sure of the definition here, but definitely there will be inequality. I think the bigger guys, the bigger players will have advantage of applying AI much earlier and faster. So that can affect from a competitive perspective. So there will be inequality from that perspective, from an economic perspective.
Thank you. I'll now move on to the next question. Actually, the next question you have answered earlier, Gopal. This question is about availability of open source models to be a leveler from the SME point of view. So we talked about the shared services model, which could be a real leveler for SME point of view. The next couple of questions are relating to the capabilities and the limitations of AI ML. One gentleman asked about the limitations of AI ML, and another one asked, interestingly enough, how critical is 5G to make AI ML applications? Would you like to answer this, Andre?
Sure. Okay. So I'll take the first one. What do you see are the limitations of AI and ML? I think in general, trying to take these exciting ideas about AI and ML and trying to implement them in industry is still not a very well understood process. I think a lot of companies are excited by the applications or the possibilities that can be explored, and they want to start teams to try exploring some of these solutions. But there isn't really one good way to be developing AI applications. There aren't a lot of industry best practices yet. Industry as a whole are still is even today discovering a lot of problems with traditional ML engineering, and there's a lot of tooling that is being developed to address those issues. So I would say the limitations is that it is a very high cost center, and there's a lot of uncertainty involved in whether the applications are going to be delivered at the end of the day. So it's kind of like it's like a high risk, high reward kind of a play. And I think one of the ways to de-risk here is to always come back to the fundamentals, to think about what is the business problem, and to first think of a simple way that you can solve that problem, sort of like trying to do a smart thing, but in a dumb way first before you try the AI approach.
Absolutely, absolutely. Focus on the problem. Focus on the problem.
Yep.
Technology is a tool and an enabler. Without a clear definition or understanding of the problem, then the tool may be of little use, or worse still, you use the tool wrongly and you get not what you expect. So there's another the question related to 5G to make AI and ML applications. Would you like to take that one, Gopal? Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a lot more. There's a couple of questions earlier also about compute power. Why now that AI has become very popular? AI was coined in 1958, and that's a very relevant question in today's context, right? Compute power is amazing. What the cloud can do today, right? All your email, imagine the Google email system and all, it is actually hosting millions of email IDs, right, accounts, and it has got the kind of compute power to handle volume, velocity, and variety of data, right? We are dealing with a lot of data. In the past, we don't even keep data after 1 year or 2 years, right? Unless for financial reasons you keep for 7 years. So, and that in a row, and a lot of customers are not mining their data. So now with machine learning, that ability for you to mine historical data, which is relevant, and you need to make insights, is possible, and you can run it out of the cloud. You don't have to have it in-house. You can have you have your backend system like an SAP or Oracle or Microsoft. You can actually extract through ETL programs and all. You can extract it, put it on the cloud, crunch it, output back, and then you take decisions. So it has become powerful. So 5G is going to make it even a lot more pervasive, right? It's going to be able to do, okay, the other thing that I know is my kids, my son plays games, right? Gaming and all. Now gaming is going to be on his phone. With a powerful game, right? With 5G and all, he can actually do a lot more stuff on the phone in the SMRT when he's moving from point to point. So that is going to get flooded. You're going to have a lot more consumer apps that gives a lot of convenience, right? Especially for the Singaporeans like us. We are all very urban, used to the urban lifestyle. We want convenience, right? So 5G will be a lot of more function and features to your handphone. Let's put it this way. So I think 5G is going to make a lot of waves in terms of application, and a lot of people are going to use applications, do everything in your life. Actually, even controlling your lights from elsewhere, controlling your home lights, switching on speakers. You can actually do a lot more today. It's already available. It's just it's going to become more pervasive.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. There was another question. We have only time for two. Actually, we covered most of the questions already, but we got two last questions. I beg your indulgence. I'll just try to answer them. This guy is asking, is robotics and AI more for entertainment, or do we expect smart robots in medicine and surgery? Actually, I can answer this. I mean, I'll ask the gentleman to check out Intuitive Surgical. Is listed on the NUSS Stock Exchange, and you can check out the Da Vinci. The Da Vinci is a robotic orthopedic surgeon that does orthopedic surgery more accurately, more precisely, and more quickly than the human surgeon. Check it out. It's called Da Vinci. Then on the last question, it says, how can AI help in the current COVID situation beyond predictive modeling? Andre, Gopal, any one of you?
Okay, maybe I just go first. I think in terms of the impact of COVID, okay, this is unprecedented. It's very hard to model anything, and we are doing something for clients. But what clients are doing today is they are looking for alternative source. What has happened is the biggest source came from China, and when the borders got blocked, they realized they are over dependent on supply source. And this customer of mine is actually looking at multiple sources now. They are, saying that, okay, I need to be smart to see where I can get alternative sources. So you need to apply some kind of machine learning algorithm as well. How to split the orders? What can you split? Because you got a timing element. You need certain raw materials to manufacture, right? So there are all these other components. It's not a very straightforward answer, but there are areas where people are already alluding to that to see what kind of decisions I can make when a particular border closed down. And this might actually continue, as you have been reading, right? With the pandemic, there is the mutation of the pandemic. It's not very clear. We are not actually solving the issue of the virus. We are only solving that it is in the body and how we prevent someone from getting affected by COVID-19. So this could be there. So borders can keep closing and all. So if we have AI models that remembers what happens during the COVID-19 to a particular business, you can actually use that model to feed into your 2021 data and say, this is what I expect. Should I manufacture so much, or should I not do that much? You can do a lot of alternative decision making with AI in this area.
Excellent, thank you very much. And in relation to that, I'd like to ask Andre, do you think in terms of accuracy and speed of detecting the swab test, or of compiling the data of people swab, or of even reading scans, would AI and ML be able to help in increasing the accuracy of the readings and in compiling the readings and the data, and also in the speed of response, so that there can be better trigger alerts to better actions to be taken more timely fashion? What do you think, Andre?
So I guess it's kind of difficult to comment without understanding how the tests are actually being conducted and what is the process in which they conclude on those results. But based on what I know from like a outsider's perspective, I would say that one way that AI could be useful is given that we have collected data about all of these information, like say infection rates at different parts of the country, what we could do is we could look at traditional forecasting techniques to say, is the temporary spike that I see in cases here entirely due to chance, or is it possible that there is actually a cluster that is building in this area?
Thank you very much. And with that, I think we've come to the end of today's seminar. Thank you, my fellow panel, Gopal and Andre, for the excellent suggestions. And thank you very much to the NUSS team, Dinesh, Irene, and last but not least, Fatia, for an excellent job. And Fatia now